Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Let me use this opportunity to appreciate the IAS director and all the team here for organizing this seminar and hosting and welcoming here to the IAS house. I also want to appreciate my colleagues at the Graphic Design Research Unit. Professor Harland is here. Thank you so much. And the colleagues in computer science, Dr. Firas is here. And Sarah is here. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I must admit, it's most of your work that has inspired my research journey. So thank you very much. So today I would like to discuss an ongoing research that sits at the intersection of visual communication, cultural heritage documentation, and emerging technologies. The work I'm presenting today is titled Archives in Motion, Reimagining Graphic Heritage for Wellbeing and Social Memory. So I'll give you a scenario. A visitor for the first time drops at the port of Opobo, where I am from in Nigeria. It sits on the Atlantic Ocean and has been home to trade between local and global markets since the 19th century. So what meets the visitor is there's this beautiful welcome arch at the waterfront that shows welcome to Opobo town. From there, the visitor definitely experiences some ancient monuments. There's some architectural pieces, but then there's something that stands out once they get into the town, which is compounds, what we call polos, houses that have flags at the top or in front of those houses. Those houses carry symbols, they carry colors, and they carry other visual elements. So to our visitor, this is just a decoration. It could appear like a decoration, but it's not. To indigents and members of that community, it means identity. It's a reflection of belonging and it's a reflection of authority and lineage. And these flags atop these buildings, they tell you whose walking new house you're standing in front of, whose lineage persists in that community. And it also tells you stories about trade, migration, leadership, and social organization. So we can see that other parts of the world have written their histories and documented them. But these are visual elements that have not been documented. And of course, it opens a conversation for the visitor to engage with this historical city town, as they call it, Opobo in Nigeria. So for me, it raises a question. These visual systems that exist in Opobo, if they were to disappear for one reason or the other, what part of history lives with them? However, I have a few questions that will frame this seminar today. The first one being, how do we preserve the past? That's my first question. The second one is, how do we document the relationships between people, place, and identity? And then, how do we design the future of memory? So these questions are not merely rhetorical, they arise from the persistent challenge we find in cultural heritage studies, which is the challenge of preserving and interpreting information that exists in our environment. So this seminar will reflect and explore on how design research can help to recover and interpret visual knowledge systems that exist outside of contemporary alphabetic writing and institutions such as libraries and museums. And more specifically, it will focus on the graphic heritage that exists in Opobo Kingdom, and it will also consider how storytelling, how digital technologies and design might work together to transform fragile cultural memory in accessible and collaborative digital archives. So these are the questions that I used to frame this work. The concept of this seminar is anchored in graphic heritage. Graphic heritage refers to the visual artifacts and symbolic systems through which communities communicate identity, authority, social organization, and collective memory. These include elements such as language, typography, textiles, monuments, architectural ornamentation, and spatial markers that are embedded within everyday communities. Unlike traditional archival materials such as manuscripts and printed texts, graphic heritage often exists in dispersed and embodied forms. It is embedded in festivals, ritual performances, spatial arrangements, and objects that carry meaning through their visual symbolism. Consequently, graphic heritage frequently operates as what we might call invisible archives, a system of knowledge that exists, it circulates, and shapes cultural identity, but remains largely undocumented within formal research infrastructures. This understanding draws heavily on the intellectual tradition developed by the Graphic Design Research Unit at Loughborough University, particularly the work of Robert Harland and Yolandi Berger, and also Sarah Saravi on cultural mapping. Their research has demonstrated that graphic design should not be understood merely as aesthetic production, but as a method of investigating social systems through visual artifacts. Projects such as Named After Nelson, I Madiba, Remembering Madiba, Loughborough Town Observatory, and collaborations in South Africa all illustrate what seemingly visual elements such as street names, signages, and public inscriptions can reveal that they are deeper histories of identity, power, and social change. In these projects that I've come to find, the city itself becomes a living, breathing graphic archive. So my work extends this methodological approach by my senior colleagues here, and I wish to examine their concept, visual heritage, within the social structures of Opobo, my hometown. So let me welcome you to my hometown, Opobo. I am from Opobo by marriage, but from the same river state in Nigeria. So you're welcome to Opobo. The Opobo Kingdom occupies a significant place within the historical and cultural landscape of River State, Nigeria, more or less the Niger Delta region. So if you look at the map of Nigeria, you will see the tail end where it's just by the Atlantic Ocean. So this is where we are situated. The kingdom was founded in the 19th century by King Juboga, widely known as King Jaja of Opobo, a prominent merchant leader who established Opobo as a major trading center following his departure from the neighboring kingdom of Boni. Under King Jaja's leadership, Opobo developed a sophisticated political and economic system centered on institutions known as war canoe houses. Now, the name War Canoe House might sound like military units, right? But these are not military units. Rather, they functioned as kinship-based socio-political organizations that structured trade, governance, and community life. Each War Canoe House possessed distinctive visual markers, their flags, their colors, their symbols, and ceremonial objects that communicated lineage, authority, and historical narratives. Over time, these visual identifiers became embedded within broader cultural practices such as festivals, masquerade performances, and public ceremonies. They therefore constitute a complex graphic language that communicates identity and historical continuity. But despite this richness of traditions, systemic documentation of this visual culture remains limited. Part of the reason for this gap lies in the historical processes that shaped the region during colonial rule. So during the colonial era, indigenous names, if you can recall, I called him Juboga. He also had an Igbo name because he migrated from Igbo land. He was a slave and was moved to Boni. So his Igbani name is Juboga, but it was translated to become Jaja, right? So his name, that is the founding father of Opobo, the names of the towns, many streets, and landmarks across the region underwent renaming during the colonial era, and they were simplified or replaced in order to accommodate colonial administrative systems and for ease of pronunciation. This process may appear minor at first glance, but its cultural significance was, the consequences were significant. Imagine your name being changed. It also takes away the meaning of your name. If your name could mean strength, power, and something else, someone comes to rename it, it diminishes from who you originally are. It affects. So we know that place names and other historical events, social relationships, and environmental knowledge often encode what we stand to mean or stand to believe. And when these names change, the narratives embedded within them gradually fade from public awareness. Similarly, colonial documentation system tended to prioritize administrative records, statistical trade reports, and other reports that were handwritten over visual oral history. So when, of course, formal documentation for the heritage information or data started coming up, things like museums, photography, libraries, and all, it favored those ones that were seen rather than those ones that were taught, which are intangible, the oral ones. So in other words, while textual records may have obscured aspects of local history, graphic heritage continued to carry the culture memory forward. It's more of our canoe, war canoe houses. Okay. So there's a video here, just for you to get a feel of the activity that happens during the 28th to the 15th of January. So the 28th of December every year, we have this display of prowess and authority and communal life on the ocean. I mean, we have a huge history with the British, with the British, whereby we also went on the ocean like this to fight the Ashanti. So if you were to talk about safety on the high seas, that's not what we're looking at right now. But this is the way they carry themselves. This is the way we carry ourselves. So each family is represented by the chief of the compound. Their flags are put forward in front, letting people know from afar that this house is coming. This is what their symbol stands for, and so on and so forth. So while I began my research journey during my master's in between 2011 and 2014, I went back home to my same place, Loughborough, and my goal was straightforward: to create a mobile application, a prototype, to publicize the Opobo International Boat Racing and Regatta Festival. Like I tried to explain earlier, between the 28th of December to the 15th of January of the following year, we have a series of events that take place that brings about 2 million people from around the world to come and witness and participate in the activities that take place in Opobo. And so it was pretty straightforward: create an interface that could guide visitors through the festivals and all the activities there, to provide historical information, and to enhance the overall cultural experience. So, however, while I was extracting information, taking photographs, going about the town, and interviewing people, I now discovered something deeper. So what became increasingly clear was the festival itself was only on the surface, the visible graphic heritage we could see. What I saw afterwards was a variety of visual symbols, places, information, and data that had never been documented formally. And I saw that flags represented historical lineages. I saw that architectural forms referenced historical events. And then ceremonial artifacts embody social hierarchies and political authority. So this discovery raised a crucial question. Of course, if they are not documented, all of these things, what now happens to them in the future? So that continued to inspire my work. And some of the findings show, of course, when I try to interview people and then work with them, of course, ask them certain questions and then put them into visual form. Some of them gave me feedback like, oh, seeing walk in new houses and festival stories on the app design, it made me remember things I had almost forgotten. It feels like our history is being kept alive for the next generation, and so on and so forth. Some of the feedback was very positive. So this continued on to my doctoral research, where, of course, when I started earlier on, I was interviewed by Professor Harland and Yolandi. They were supposed to be my potential supervisors if I was going to come to Loughborough. So that was our very first engagement. So during the doctoral research I did back home, I discovered that, of course, this is a different institutional context if we were to talk about graphic heritage and this. But then again, we found out that graphic communication can help to improve accessibility, enhance user experience in healthcare settings. And in cultural context, we see that graphic communication can also help to preserve memory, transmit identity, and sustain intergenerational language. So to begin this work, I looked at the signage systems that persist in my country, Nigeria, and many of them, of course, we are multilingual in Nigeria, about 250 indigenous languages, and no signages carry this information, no graphic materials like, of course, brochures, manuals, pamphlets in healthcare settings, none of them existed. So I had to start from the signage showing of course, a wayfinding system from the outside exterior of the hospital till you get into the hospital, a system that keeps you informed until you get your service and find your way back home. So that was the goal of the research. And of course, in River State, we had about 340 primary healthcare centers, and that was a large scope to cover. However, I had to focus on just one as a template and about two others. But I also went back to Opobo to ensure that the Ibani language was kept alive. So if you look at this picture, you will see that some of course, there are icons there. I had to do it to accommodate those who, of course, could understand the symbols, but then, of course, to include about four other languages, the Igbo language, the Ijaw language, and the Ogba language, and then English, which all of us were aware of. So I did that as well. To ensure that the Ibani language was kept alive, I focused on that as well. So to complement the doctoral thesis, I also created an illustrated guidebook for younger users of the healthcare center. And I used my daughter Zoe as the lead character, so that, I mean, the younger generation could be able to, relate to her and the content. So she was going to also translate these healthcare signs in our own indigenous language. So the translations are there, the visuals are there, and then there's English language for them. It was about 12 pages. It's still a work in progress, but it hasn't been published though. So I went on the field. This is for the last 10 years, for a decade, the span of a decade between 2011 and 2024. Around that time, let's say 2014, when I was done with the first master's, and 2024, I was able to extract a lot of material. I have about 2,000 materials that I got from the field from this particular location alone. And the question is, what next? Which, of course, that's how I'm closing my speech. What are we going to do with this? So on the field, I was able to get a lot of images, interview a lot of people. I also actually did a tour of the community. Of course, we call it social prescribing. When you have youth that are going through a lot of mental health issues, you take them along on different walks and you find different creative methods. So one of the methods I used was to do a tour of the town. That way we carry people along so that they would know about the town, the historical sites, and then to have a sense of belonging. And also to have, of course, the young generation, they are losing interest in most of the things that exist around us. So it was important for me to take them around. I also noticed that we have this very big bell. I heard it was a gift from the British to King Jaja for one of his victories. And Loughborough is known for having a bell foundry. So we might also find out, if we dig deeper, that there could be a link between maybe this bell and Loughborough. Who knows? So, and I think there are quite a number of bells there. So these are some of the images that I was able to get from the field. So these are some of the methods that I used. Of course, I organized the youth site tour. I also did a lot of photography, and then I did oral interviews. Of course, whenever someone comes in, it doesn't matter whether you are from that place. There's always the question of extractive data. Are you coming to just take from us? What are you going to do with the data? So before you have to get into a place, I think I explained that in my workshop, you have to engage with the knowledge keepers, the elders, those people who are in charge of the community, to gain access and gain information from them. And they might also point you in the right direction on where to get relevant sources for your research. So I was able to do that and then collect a lot of stories and a lot of data and so on and so forth. So in looking at one of the diagrams by Professor Harland, when he said the micro information, the macro, and then the meso, all of that, we try to use the same diagram to emphasize who we're getting this information for. Because a lot of people might ask, why? Why? Yes, we have to ensure that graphic heritage gets to the right people who need them. We have community elders who are there not knowing the value of the information that they sit on top or the knowledge that their community carries. We have young people and Nigerians and researchers. People are in this diaspora. They might be interested in researching into this in various formats. Could be anthropologists, could be sociologists, anybody could be interested in this particular area. So extracting this information is relevant for them. And of course, at the end of the day, we shall have positive outcomes, hopefully, in terms of documenting, enhancing design literacy, documenting the local culture, preserving it, and disseminating, of course, before that knowledge dies. So these are some of the things I was able to do with generative AI. When you get this, so this image here, the one that says welcome to the ancient town of Opobo. This is what greets you at the waterfront. So I tried to use generative AI to change it and give it its original name, Opoboama, not just Opobo. It was Opoboama. So I tried to add that and enhance it, ensuring that, okay, the town symbol, which is this, they say it's a town of peace. So I had to use that to influence the prompt and the design. I was also able to bring, because this is the center of the town, the King Jaja's monument in commemoration of him. I was able to also try and do a 3D simulation of it to show all sides of it. So if you are far away, you are not resident, you're not in Nigeria, you're out there, you can get a 360 view of it. No, not yet. Okay. So this is called the Manila tree. It has its own story, full, complete story. And every picture you see of the king, he has this Manila staff with him. It has a full story. I don't think we have all day to discuss it, but I have some a souvenir which I will give some other time that contains the entire story of it. But this is a symbol of wealth because during the slave trade and the colonial era, Manila, of course, was used as a monetary value, a valued monetary system of trade and bargaining. So when you wear a lot of Manila on your body, it shows that you are wealthy. So the Opobo people still carry it to today on their staff. And the original staff is not gold, but my artificial intelligence transformed it into this gold thing that you see in front of you, enhancing it in terms of aesthetics and visibility. So this is a reflection of what Opobo is. These are the flags that many people have not seen before. A lot of people don't know that this flag exists. These flags are for the 14 founding houses. When King Jaja came from Bonny, he came in with some chiefs. Let's call them the Council of Chiefs. He came with them from Bonny with him. And each one now became a chief of a compound. And under this system, we have another 67 war canoe houses. That's where they all came out from. So it's in the concept of the father, the son, the grandchildren. So that is how they are bettered. So this represents the founding house. And under that, you have other symbols, which you see here. So they could be brothers with different names, and each brother has his own symbol, insignia, and heraldry. All of those things represent something. And I noticed that there are a lot of aquatic animals, some symbols that are there. A recurring symbol is the crown for those who have hierarchy in terms of the royal lineage. Then there is, of course, the Manila. It shows that that's a monetary system. And then the key, it kept showing. There are about 67 of them. These were some of them that I was able to replicate using artificial intelligence based on the images that I'd already extracted from the field. So we have a video here, I think, of the Judges monuments in display. That's a 360 view of it. Thank you. Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is fine. So this is an old building of one of Jaja's places. It's not his full palace per se, but this is a very old building that also served as administrative headquarters of the British there in Opobo. And Jaja was also there as it was one of his work sites or offices. So this is a 3D simulation of that particular building. Of course, the building, this photo was taken in 1965, and I found it in the archives and the palace, but it does not exist. The building no longer exists. So I was able to use the 3D simulation to bring it back to life, or to reimagine it, as it were, so to speak. So this is our wonderful King Jaja in all his finery. Of course, in those days, not everybody was privileged to dress like a proper English person. Many of them were still wearing loincloths and all, but he, of course, because of his level in society, he was properly dressed and all. So I also tried to see, of course, young people have, well, including myself, I've not had any engagement with him, but it would be nice to see what he would have appeared to be, right? And I can imagine it with some audio, him speaking with his own voice in his own dialect, how nice it will be. So these are the kind of things we're trying to imagine. So these are some of the sacred objects that are there. This one in particular, the Igelege drum. It is stored in the polos or the houses where the volcano houses, and it's only used when they want to announce a festival or a ceremony. It doesn't come out all the time. So they use it, once they start hitting it, you know that there's a serious activity that wants to take place. So I just labeled it how it's supposed to be. Imagine if we had an app or a website, or we're able to scan something and we're able to get the definition and description of each part of that object. After naming it and tagging it, labeling it, we're also supposed to get information pertaining to the object. So it shows the top says the mouth of the drum that produces tunes at the start and the call of the Wartime Festival. We have this symbol or motif at the corner. It says, is the ear of the gods to hear the melody and echo back messages to the player. And then the serpentine motifs, this depicting ancient wisdom. It can be found everywhere, many places. Some houses have that as their own symbol. I've not been able to extract that data and the meaning, but on this particular one, it tries to say, okay, this is for wisdom. So perhaps when the gods speak, they're speaking back and giving you wisdom. Explain. So I also used a 2D image and transformed it into what you see before you. Thank you. So there were some ethical principles guiding the project. And the first one was to put the community first. And I'm hoping that as we progress, it's not only Opobo, but each community where we function and where we research, we have to put them first, ensuring that all research outputs will be co-owned with the community. You don't always design for, you can always design with. That's where the co-creation, co-participation approach comes into play. Again, language justice. I was privileged to be part of the North Bigelow type incubator from Stanford University, where we were tasked with designing or decolonizing the Latin text, designing text from our own culture. And that made me go back into my own culture. And I was able to extract information, research, and come up with a writing system from an existing ideogram, which is called in CBD. It's in existence, but it's not a writing system. It's an ideographic language system. So I was able to retrieve that and create some type fonts, which I would have shown here. But what I try to do is to ensure that the Ibani language will not be foregrounded or marginalized. We have to put that forward when we are documenting or creating any design going forward, I mean, to benefit the community. And then we also have to ensure that whenever we design or to improve or reconstruct any image or object, we should ensure that it is labeled AI generated, not to say, oh, this is the original. That would be telling lies. So most times people recreate an image and say, this is the original one. Then they tell the story behind it. And that's not always ethical. Then also to ensure that we close the gap between the elders and the young ones. There's a knowledge gap for both spectrum. And to ensure that when we're designing, we design for them simultaneously, such that both categories are able to benefit. And then to also create the digital archives that will be freely accessible to people. Most of my work has not been funded. So it would be good to have funding to ensure that people are able to get this work freely, both home and abroad, and also to strengthen this idea with collaborative efforts across design, storytelling, and computing. So in closing, I will go back to the questions that I used to frame the research. I ask, how do we preserve the past? How do we document the relationships between people, place, and identity? And how do we design the future of our memory? We have seen that graphic heritage exists, that exists as archives in their own right, but they are also fragile. They can fade with time, disappear with environmental change, or become disconnected from younger generations who no longer recognize their meanings. The work I've shared today is therefore not simply about documenting heritage, it's about recognizing that design, storytelling, and computational technologies together can help transform fragile cultural memory into living knowledge systems. And when interdisciplinary collaboration brings together designers, computer scientists, and community knowledge holders, we begin to build new kinds of archives, ones that are not closed repositories, but dynamic platforms for collective memory. And this mobility between physical and digital will undoubtedly foster well-being and social memory. So thank you so much for listening, and I welcome your thoughts and questions. Thank you very much.